At 5:17 local time, the carrier's forward gun mount comes to life. Metal shifts. A few crewmen stop mid-step. Condition 3. On the bridge, nobody asks why. They already understand that something is off. The sea is calm, almost glassy, stretching in a flat silver sheet all the way to the horizon. The first light of dawn rests low over the water, pale, cold, and quiet. To anyone without training, it would look like another ordinary transit. To the radar watch, it does not. Within seconds, 3 new surface contacts appear on the display. Their spacing is tight, their bearing is unusual, their speed is rising. Bearing 241, range 21 nautical miles, closing fast. The tactical plot updates itself almost instantly. Vectors sharpen, distances begin to fall. No flag, no AIS, no radio traffic. On the bridge wing, the officer of the deck leans forward just enough to read the repeater more clearly. He does not raise his voice, he does not need to. Log it, hail once. The radio comes alive with a transmission that is calm, formal, and exact, sent across international guard frequencies. Unidentified warships, this is a United States Navy aircraft carrier operating in international waters. State your intentions. There is no reply. The contacts increase speed again. Inside the Combat Information Center, the low hum in the room deepens as systems fully wake up. Consoles brighten, track numbers are assigned. Electronic surveillance begins sorting noise from signal, quietly listening before doing anything else. The range falls below 18 nautical miles. Closest point of approach is now under 4 miles. The watch supervisor calls it out. Tracks maneuvering in concert. That changes everything. 3 ships making coordinated turns with no random drift and no uncertainty is not normal merchant traffic. It is not coincidence. It is deliberate. The captain arrives on the bridge without ceremony. One glance is enough for him to take in the displays. No dramatic pause, no speech. Maintain course, maintain speed. The carrier does not turn away. Below decks, the sound of boots echoes through narrow passageways as key stations are manned. Crews move from memory more than thought. Doors are secured, hatches locked down. The ship tightens its posture without anyone needing to explain it. The forward gun mount finishes a slow, careful rotation by only a few degrees. Enough to be noticed, not enough to look provocative. In CIC, identification becomes firmer. Long-range optics sharpen hull profiles. Mast shapes begin to match known silhouettes. The intelligence watch speaks. Contacts assessed as Russian surface combatants. Multiple units. Formation tightening. No one on the bridge visibly reacts. The label does not change the equation. The math is what matters. The Russian ships keep closing, now inside 15 nautical miles. Their headings are assertive, angled not to shadow the carrier, but to press toward its projected track. This is not escort behavior. This is pressure. The captain's voice remains level, almost casual. Second hail. The message goes out again. Clear, time-stamped, recorded. Above the formation, the sky remains empty. No aircraft appear. No strong radar emissions suggest a targeting posture. Only speed, bearing, and intent. Electronic warfare logs a brief spike. Search radar, someone says quietly. Low power, intermittent. They're painting. Not a lock. Not yet. But close enough that everyone notices. The carrier continues ahead at flank safe speed, its massive hull cutting a straight line through the sea. The escort ships shift outward, almost invisibly, widening the protective arc with movements so subtle they would mean nothing to an outsider. On deck, sailors remain at their stations, eyes forward, expressions unreadable. No shouting, no visible fear, only readiness. The range drops to 12 nautical miles. CPA now 3.1, CIC reports. Time to CPA under 8 minutes. That is too close to leave room for misunderstanding. A helicopter crew begins spinning up. Rotors start turning, slowly at first. The aircraft does not launch, it simply wakes. The sound rolls across the deck, a low mechanical growl under the morning wind. Then the Russian formation shifts again. One ship edges slightly ahead of the others and narrows the angle further. The captain watches the bearing line creep inward. Log maneuver as unsafe. The order is procedural, legal, final. By now, every system is recording. Radar, optical, infrared, electronic surveillance. Every course change, every knot of speed, every second of radio silence is being captured and stored. The distance falls to 10 nautical miles. Still no shots, still no words. Just 3 Russian warships pressing toward one of the most powerful naval formations on Earth. and a carrier strike group that has not altered course by a single degree. Out here, no one wants to be the first to blink, and the clock keeps moving. At 5:26 local time, the distance closes again. Not wildly, not carelessly, deliberately. The lead Russian ship shifts 5 degrees to port, small enough to seem accidental, precise enough to matter. 30 seconds later, the other two mirror the move. Their formation compresses. Their bows begin to angle more directly into the carrier's projected path. This is no longer parallel movement. This is interception. In CIC, the surface picture refreshes in real time. Blue symbols hold steady. Red vectors bend inward. Tracks maneuvering to reduce CPA, the watch supervisor reports. Pattern consistent with pressure approach. The language is clinical. The reality is not. On the bridge, the captain studies the plot, then the horizon, then the plot again. Behind the ship, the carrier's wake remains perfectly straight, a long white scar across dark water. "Maintain course," he says again. The carrier still refuses to yield water. Below the flight deck, the ship moves into deeper readiness. No alarms sound, nothing dramatic happens. Switches are thrown, safeties are adjusted, checklists are completed by memory. The escort screen opens outward by fractions of a mile. Destroyers drift farther apart in motions that look almost lazy, but every adjustment has purpose. The formation breathes without losing shape. At 5:31, another detail appears. Electronic support measures picking up intermittent surface search radar, CIC reports. Low power rotational sweep. They are not locking, they are looking. That matters. A fire control signal would mean something else entirely. This is still a probe. A test of response times, geometry, discipline. The carrier's answer is silence and steadiness. On the flight deck, the helicopter's rotors reach full speed. The blades blur into a solid disc. The sound rolls hard over the water. Still, the aircraft remains chained down for the moment, ready but restrained. Presence without provocation. The Russian ships continue to close, now inside 9 nautical miles. Their wakes sharpen as their speed climbs little by little. Half a knot here, another there. No sudden bursts, no obvious mistake. They want the carrier to react first. In CIC, the projected pass tightens again. CPA now 2.4 nautical miles. Time to CPA 6 minutes. That is deeply uncomfortable water for ships of this size. The captain steps closer to the bridge windows, resting his hands lightly on the console. "Hail them one last time." The transmission is sent, recorded, and unmistakable. "Russian naval vessels, this is a United States Navy aircraft carrier. You are maneuvering unsafely in international waters. Alter course immediately." The reply channel remains dead. No acknowledgement, no denial, only movement. At 5:34, the lead Russian ship cuts its bow inward again, just enough to narrow the intercept further. The change trims only tenths of a mile from the CPA, but that is enough. Not enough to force a collision, but more than enough to signal intent. Inside the carrier, that intent is being preserved frame by frame. Long-range optics stabilize on bridge wings, deck crews, and gun positions. Infrared systems paint heat across steel hulls, exhaust plumes, and running gear. Every image is time-stamped, every angle archived. The carrier's forward gun mount adjusts again, barely noticeable. A few more degrees. It does not track aggressively. It does not threaten openly. It simply sends a message that everything has been seen. Outwardly, the carrier remains calm. No course change, no speed change. The bow cuts evenly through the water. Inwardly, the ship is fully alert. Stations report ready. Air defense plots remain clear. No airborne contacts, no missile cues, only surface pressure and a shrinking patch of sea. At 5:37, one of the trailing Russian ships turns slightly wider than the others. For the first time, the formation loses its perfect symmetry. It is subtle, but it is there. Pressure works both ways. The helicopter rises just enough for its skids to clear the deck, then settles again. Engines hot, crew strapped in, sensors live. The message is unmistakable. Escalation is optional. Preparation is complete. Inside CIC, a quiet observation passes between watchstanders. They're hesitating, not retreating, not backing off, but no longer moving as one. The range slips below 8 nautical miles. The carrier still holds course. Out here, power is not always measured by who moves first. Sometimes it is measured by who refuses to. And with every passing minute, the amount of water available to the Russian ships grows smaller, compressed not by force, but by restraint. At 5:41 local time, the geometry finally breaks. The lead Russian ship adds 2 knots in less than 30 seconds and nudges its rudder just enough to matter. Its bow swings inward, no longer aiming for a parallel transit, but toward the carrier's projected path. It is a small move. It is the wrong move. In CIC, the display tightens instantly. Lead contact accelerating. Course alteration reducing CPA below 2 nautical miles. The numbers redraw. Safe margins vanish. On the bridge, the captain never takes his eyes off the horizon. Log the maneuver. Mark it unsafe. His tone does not change. It does not need to. The urgency is already built into the ship. The lead Russian vessel holds the new line, pushing deeper into the narrowing water between hulls that each displace tens of thousands of tons. The trailing ships attempt to stay in formation, but the timing is no longer clean. One follows late, another overcorrects. The symmetry is gone. That is when the carrier answers. Not with speed, not with words, with visibility. The forward gun mount rotates again. This time, the movement is unmistakable, smooth, and deliberate. It settles on a bearing that leaves no doubt. The carrier sees everything. Not a lock, not a threat, a statement. In CIC, electronic surveillance lights up with fresh data. Surface search radar spike, the EW officer reports. Short burst, narrow beam. They're active now. Still not a targeting signal, but closer than before. The kind of behavior noted in training manuals as an indicator that the situation is moving in the wrong direction. The helicopter lifts cleanly from the deck. Rotors bite into the morning air as it moves forward and climbs low over the sea. No flares, no open doors, just sensors awake and eyes on target. From the Russian ships, the helicopter is impossible to ignore. From the carrier, it is simply procedure. At 5:44, the range drops below 6 nautical miles. That is close enough to make out sailors on deck through optics. Close enough to read hull numbers. Close enough that mistakes stop being abstract and become immediate. The lead Russian ship edges in once more, shaving a little more from the CPA. The move is assertive but controlled. It is designed to force the first visible reaction. The carrier gives none. Instead, the escorts move. Not dramatically. Not quickly. A destroyer slides outward, widening the arc. Another adjusts bearing to preserve overlap and coverage. The formation reshapes itself with practiced precision, closing invisible doors. To an outside observer, almost nothing seems different. To the Russian ships, the water is starting to disappear. The helicopter passes across their bows at a safe distance. The camera turret tracks. A green beam from a laser designator flickers briefly across steel surfaces, bridge windows, and mast structures. Non-lethal, unmistakable. In CIC, the live sensor feed pours in. High-resolution imagery, infrared overlays, every visible movement on deck recorded in real time. This is no longer just a tense approach. It is documentation. The Russian formation falters again. One trailing ship slows slightly, its wake shortening. The second hesitates, then copies the slowdown a few seconds too late. The pressure has changed. By 5:47, the lead ship is still on course, but it is no longer tightening the line. The bow stops edging inward. The closest point of approach steadies at just under 2 nautical miles. Still unsafe, still uncomfortably close, but no longer tightening. For the first time in several minutes, the situation stops getting worse. The captain finally speaks again. Maintain course, maintain speed. The carrier moves on, unchanged and unshaken. Above the water, the helicopter makes another slow orbit, then gradually widens the circle. It remains visible, remains present, but no longer presses the point. The message has already been delivered. Repeating it would serve no purpose. Electronic activity from the Russian ships begins to fade. The brief search radar spikes disappear, and the spectrum grows quiet again. In CIC, the watch supervisor notes it in a calm voice. They're backing off their sensors. That is the real signal. At sea, control is rarely announced out loud. More often, it reveals itself through what the other side decides to stop doing. The range begins to open, slowly and almost reluctantly. 6 nautical miles becomes 6.5, then 7. No radio call comes from the Russian ships, no explanation, no acknowledgement, only a quiet change in the numbers. The carrier never altered course, never reduced speed, never raised its voice. And somewhere in that strip of water that almost closed, a decision was clearly made and then revised. The Russian ships never fired, but they did not need to. By then, they had already reached the line that mattered, and they had learned exactly where that line stood. At 5:52 local time, the momentum shifts fully. Not with drama, not with some obvious visual break, but with quiet certainty. The distance between hulls stretches past 7 nautical miles, then 7.5. Each new number feels less like a surprise and more like confirmation. Inside Combat Information Center, the surface plot eases, though it never goes cold. Contacts opening distance, the watch supervisor reports. Speed decreasing across the formation. No one celebrates. No one is supposed to. On the bridge, the captain remains where he is, facing forward, hands still, expression unreadable. He gives no new command because none is necessary. The carrier continues its transit as though this had all been part of the routine. That, in many ways, is the point. The Russian ships alter course again, this time outward. The lead vessel eases away first, its bow no longer pointed toward the carrier's projected path. The others follow a moment later, each moves slightly out of sync with the last. Their discipline is no longer as sharp as it was when they approached. The helicopter continues a wider orbit, far enough away to avoid unnecessary pressure, close enough to keep watch. Its sensors remain active, its cameras continue recording. It does not dive lower, does not signal dramatically, does not need to. Its presence alone is enough. A steady reminder that nothing on the water is going unnoticed. Electronic surveillance confirms the change. Russian emissions minimal, the EW officer notes. No active search sweeps detected. In this situation, silence speaks clearly. The escorting destroyers hold their adjusted positions, maintaining a layered shield around the carrier. Their movements are subtle, almost invisible unless someone is studying the tactical plot in detail. But the geometry they create leaves no simple approach lane. What remains for the Russian ships is open ocean and a choice to use it. At 5:57, the CPA expands beyond 3 nautical miles. That threshold matters. It marks the shift from direct pressure to distant presence, from unsafe maneuvering to simple observation. The carrier does not acknowledge the change outwardly. On deck, sailors remain where they are, posture unchanged. There is no dramatic release of tension because none had been shown in the first place. Readiness was the standard all along, and it remains the standard now. Inside CIC, the incident log keeps growing. Bearings, speeds, course changes, sensor captures, every detail preserved. This is not about remembering what happened, it is about proving what happened. At 6:01, the helicopter receives the order to return. No final sweep, no dramatic exit. It turns smoothly, climbs slightly, and heads back toward the flight deck. The sound of its rotors fades into the broader machinery of the ship. The Russian ships continue opening the gap. 8 nautical miles. Then 9. The water between them widens again, as though the entire confrontation had been less about time and more about the temporary compression of space. On the bridge, the captain finally steps back from the windows. Resume standard watch. Not stand down. Not secure from action. Just resume. Because nothing about this encounter required visible escalation in order to end. The carrier strike group holds formation and slips back into its routine geometry without ceremony. To anyone watching from a distance, it might look like a return to normal. In truth, normal never stopped. The Russian ships remain on the horizon, still there, still moving, but no longer shaping the encounter. Their course now runs offset from the carrier's path, parallel at a distance that suggests monitoring rather than direct confrontation. They have been checked without contact, redirected without collision, and answered without unnecessary drama. In modern naval encounters, the absence of gunfire does not mean the absence of force. In many cases, it is the clearest form of control. Every sensor aboard the carrier and its escorts continues to watch. Every movement is still tracked. But the urgency has drained from the moment, replaced by the kind of measured vigilance that defines professional seamanship. At 6:08, the incident is formally downgraded. There is no announcement over speakers, no dramatic declaration, only a subtle shift in posture. As the tension fades, the sea remains calm. The sky remains empty. The carrier continues on its original course, unchanged, having held its ground not through noise, speed, or spectacle, but through discipline and restraint. Out here, the most decisive moments rarely arrive with sound. Very often, they pass in silence. At 6:16 local time, the horizon clears further. The Russian ships are still visible now, small dark shapes against the growing light, but their bearings are steady. Their speeds are even. Their course no longer cuts across the carrier's path. The water between them has opened once more. Inside CIC, the surface picture settles back into routine geometry. Tracks remain tagged, sensors remain live, nothing is erased, nothing is ignored. This is how modern naval encounters usually end. Not with blasts, not with speeches, with data. Every maneuver from the last 49 minutes is already archived. Radar sweeps, optical frames, Infrared signatures, electronic emissions, course changes measured down to fractions of a degree. The entire event has been written in numbers, timestamps, and recorded behavior. On the bridge, the captain reviews the log in silence. He does not need to add commentary. The record already says everything that matters. Unsafe maneuvers documented, warnings issued, restraint maintained. The carrier never deviated. The carrier never rushed the situation. The carrier never gave up control of the space around it. Below decks, sailors rotate off their stations with the same discipline they brought to them. No dramatic release, no exaggerated storytelling, just a return to ordinary watch standing. That is what professionalism looks like. It does not flare up and vanish. It stays consistent. On the flight deck, the helicopter is secured. Its blades fold. Sensors power down. Memory modules are removed, labeled, sealed, and handed off. What happened here will not be argued from memory. It will be reviewed in detail. Farther away, the Russian ships continue on. Their formation is looser now, less exact. They are no longer applying pressure. They are no longer shaping the event. They are responding to what it became. And at sea, reacting is its own kind of concession. This moment will probably never become a headline. There may be no dramatic footage released, no public statement designed for the cameras. That is not usually how these encounters are measured. What matters is who controlled the timeline, who controlled the geometry, who forced the final adjustment. The answer is there in the wakes trailing behind each hull. The carrier's wake never bent. In naval doctrine, restraint is not the lack of strength. It is strength used with precision. It reflects confidence in the ship, in the crew, and in the chain of command. Escalation is easy. Ending a tense encounter without crossing the line takes far more control. Somewhere beyond the horizon, analysts will replay the footage, frame by frame. They will study how pressure was answered without recklessness, how presence replaced aggression, how quiet discipline spoke louder than threats. And somewhere else, the same footage will likely be reviewed for another reason entirely. To understand exactly where the boundary was. Because boundaries at sea are rarely marked on charts alone. More often, they are defined by behavior. By 6:30, the carrier strike group is fully back in its transit rhythm. Aircraft move overhead, escorts hold their lanes. The ocean returns to its indifferent calm. But the space around the carrier is not quite the same as it was before. Out here, encounters do not truly end the moment ships separate. They end when the lesson becomes clear. And the lesson here is simple. Approach matters, discipline matters, and mistaking restraint for weakness is an error that tends to correct itself very quickly. The Russian ships fade farther into the distance, still present, still being observed, but no longer central to the day's operations. The carrier continues forward, mission intact, posture unchanged. Nothing spectacular happened. That is exactly why it mattered. And that leaves one final question hanging over the water, a question without an easy answer. When tension rises at sea and intentions become harder to read, is restraint the strongest tool a Navy can use? Or does restraint invite the next challenge? The ocean offers no answer. It only remembers who held their course.